For this episode of Snowmobile Stuff brought to you by Royal Distributing, I'm talking drive belts, how to get the most life out of them, and also when to know when to replace them. Let's start with that. If you're lucky, the drive belt hasn't decided on its own to come out through the belly pan or turn into shrapnel and cords wound around your primary clutch. If this happens, either case can cost you a lot in repair bills, especially if the cord that's been wrapped around your primary has gotten lodged in between it and the engine block and taken out the crank seal. Well, that seal needs to be repaired properly, otherwise it can lead to severe engine damage down the road. Now, if the cords do wind around the clutch, it doesn't always take out the crank seal, but you have to make sure you get all that old belt out of there before you run the machine again to avoid any further damage. A multi-tool is a great way to pick all that stuff out. Now, if your belt hasn't blown yet and you're lucky enough to not have that happen, there's a couple of clues that you can look for to avoid a catastrophic belt failure. One clue is if you start to feel a thump, thump, thump out of your sled under slow, steady acceleration. This is most likely caused to a burn mark or a narrow spot on the belt caused by the primary clutch slipping on it in one spot, wearing out that one little area. Now, if the burn mark isn't too severe, a drive belt can last quite a while like this, but I really wouldn't recommend it. It is a weak point and also the point of failure when you start to really put power through the belt again. Sometimes this narrow spot is hard to see and identify, so if you suspect this is your problem, take the belt off your sled and run your fingers along both sides of the belt, feeling for a little divot. What causes this is excessive slipping of the primary on the belt, literally burning itself into it. Now, this usually happens because the primary is trying to engage the belt and spin it, but it simply can't move the belt, therefore it's grinding away on that one spot. Plus, this is usually accompanied by a tire burnout sound and blue smoke coming out from under your hood. This belt burning can happen in simple situations like trying to load your sled up a ramp into the back of a trailer, or if it's stuck in heavy wet snow, or if simply the parking brake has been left on. Now, if you find yourself in the situation where you are giving the sled throttle but it just doesn't want to move, stop giving it throttle, hopefully before the blue smoke has appeared from under your hood. Then identify the problem and fix it, like releasing the parking brakes. In addition, if you smoke the drive belt really bad, not only have you ruined an expensive drive belt, you've probably done damage to the aluminum of the primary clutch sheaves, and this is even a more expensive repair to make. Heat is another enemy to long belt life. Now, it's not too much of a concern on low horsepower sleds, but as those horsepower levels increase, so does the stresses and demands of the drive belt, therefore the heat is going up with it. Long fast pulls across a lake are going to generate a ton of heat in the drive belt. Also, repeated accelerations or long on-throttle sessions in powder snow will definitely put a lot of heat in the drive belt and clutches. There's not a whole lot you can do to prevent this heat from coming. Just slow down every once in a while to let your sleds cool off, and also make sure the cooling on your sled is working the way the manufacturers intended it to. And lastly, very important, make sure your clutches are adjusted properly and working the way they should. A visual inspection of the belt can also show signs of potential failure. Check for any physical signs that the belt is delaminating or if there's any missing chunks. Also check for cracking in the root of the corrugation, especially on older belts. Now, you might find there's a little bit of cord sticking out of the side, and this is pretty normal, and it can be simply clipped off if it's hanging out. Now, basically, if the belt looks like it's in good shape, it probably is and can be reinstalled. Under normal riding conditions, a snowmobile belt can last thousands and thousands of kilometers, but there's still a couple of things you can do to absolutely maximize belt life. The one thing I like to do, regardless of what brand of belt I install, is a small break-in period to season the belt. My personal procedure is pretty simple. I'm looking to put 2 or 3 heat cycles through the belt before doing anything that builds high heat. This doesn't take long and can easily be done on a short trail ride. Now I'm looking to build heat up to a normal operating temperature and then let it all cool back off to ambient again. Now, I've definitely found this heat cycling technique has improved belt life on high horsepower applications that I've ridden in the past. But here too, there's definitely one more trick, and that's to season or break in your spare belt at the same time by switching them back and forth. That way, if your primary belt does fail on you, you can go to your backup spare belt and it's ready to go right away. Another thing you can do to absolutely get the maximum lifespan out of your belt is to adjust your secondary clutch to take up for the amount that's been worn off the side of the belt over time, which it's naturally going to do. What you're looking for is to bring the sheaves of your secondary clutch closer together to make sure that the belt rides in the manufacturer's recommended position. That way, the secondary and primary clutches are working together the way that they're designed to work. Just remember, if you make this adjustment to chase the wear down on your drive belt, once you do replace it, you have to open that clutch up again. Otherwise, the drive belt is going to be way too tight in there, and that's going to cause other problems with your clutching. That's it for this episode of Snow Stuff by Royal Distributing. But before we go, I wanted to leave you two more pieces of advice, and that's to make sure that the spare belt on your machine is the correct spare belt for your machine, and that also the spare belt is good enough to get you to wherever you got to go. Otherwise, that sled of yours is quickly going to turn into a toboggan as it's being towed back to town.